Frenchman metaphorically kicking himself in the cockpit.
Kicking himself in the what? For the 1993 Hungarian Grand Prix, runaway championship leaders Williams once again ran away with qualifying, with Alain Prost taking pole position ahead of Damon Hill. This was Prost's third pole in a row and his 11th in the last 10 races. Best of the rest was Michael Schumacher, almost 6/10 off the pace of the Williams, and fourth was Ayrton Senna, a whole 1.8 seconds back. Next came Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger, and once again the main struggle story was that of Michael Andretti, who could only manage 11th on the grid. For some of the 1993 season, there had been a rule in place that limited the number of starting cars to 25, but since the previous race, the teams had agreed to let all 26 cars start, allowing the Lola cars of Scuderia Italia to round out the grid. When the formation lap started, Prost didn't, having somehow stalled. He was eventually able to be restarted, meaning he could start the race, but the rest of the field had already gone, so he had to start from the back. Suddenly, Hill had a clear road in front of him and absolutely no one by his side. When the race began, Hill predictably stormed away into the lead, but did you see that launch from Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi, who then got gobbled up by the pack again? Now watch as Schumacher leaves his braking too late and runs wide, allowing both Senna and Berger up his inside and through into the podium places, and Patrese through into fourth. Senna ran wide on some oil dust, very nearly throwing away his second position and allowing Berger to close right up. And what was that? Oh, it was Rubens Barrichello on only 3 wheels. Unfortunately, the replays didn't show what happened, so instead please allow me to insert my own replay with an appropriate sound effect.
To extend the gap a bit. Now this is the chicane, and already it looks to me as though Ayrton Senna is creating a bit of a traffic jam.
At the end of the first lap, the order was Hill, Senna, Berger, Patrese and Schumacher. Oh, scratch that, Schumacher's up to fourth. A lap later it was Berger under pressure, and watch this overtake! Wow! Shades of 1986 there, with Piquet versus Senna, and he made it work and went up to third place. However, later that same lap, this happened. That was the same oil dust that caught Senna out earlier, but for Schumi it had a slightly worse outcome and he dropped to 10th place. This put Berger back up to 3rd place ahead of Patrese, and John Alesi was now 5th in the other Ferrari. One of the things that makes the Hungaroring so unique in my opinion is that there's only one real overtaking spot on the track, meaning the rest of the circuit is all about putting pressure on your rivals and seeing if they'll make a mistake. This often leads to queues of cars, just like this one, with everyone at the front getting gradually more unnerved and everyone behind getting gradually more frustrated. This particular chain is the race for 3rd, with Berger at the front, then Patrese and Alesi, then Michael Andretti, who had done a good job to get up to 6th place, and then other Michael Schumacher, who by this point had recovered some positions to get back up to 7th place. However, the chain would be broken on lap 16 when Andretti dropped out of the race with a throttle problem. Such a shame for the driver who was fighting for his place in F1 and who had now retired 3 times in a row. Looks like he's not even going to make it back to the garage and... Oh, hold on a minute! That's Senna! What a dreadful few laps for McLaren as both cars drop out, and in both cases the official cause of retirement was throttle issues. That means to say that the battle you're looking at now is the fight for 2nd. Also, it looks like Schumacher's got past Alesi off screen to get back up to 4th place, and also Patrese for 3rd. If you're wondering about Alain Prost, he's actually up to 6th place already, having gained 20 positions since the start. That Williams was a confirmed rocket ship. Here's Schumacher now going for 2nd place, and he does it around the outside of turn 1, just like he did it the first time. Gerhard must have been like, oh go on then, I know what's coming, show me the way. Meanwhile, Jean Alesi made his first pit stop. There goes the 2nd Ferrari of Berger into the pits a lap later, but did you see who just went past? That was Alain Prost, already on the back of Patrese. Eventually though, Prost's impressive charge came to naught as he developed a problem with his rear bodywork and was forced to pit. Whether it was caused by contact or just bad luck, I'm not sure, but to be honest it's refreshing to see Prost having trouble rather than Hill for once. A few years ago, Random F1 Race Reviews covered the 1993 British Grand Prix, where Hill had been leading his home race until his car overheated behind the safety car, and he had actually retired from the lead of the German Grand Prix with just 2 laps to go with a tyre failure. Meanwhile, Prost had picked up the spoils and run away to a 27-point lead, but this time it just wasn't Prost's day. He eventually returned to the race a whole 7 laps down, but there was absolutely no chance of points from there. Another thing that doesn't help with scoring points is clashing wheels with a Minardi, which is exactly what Jean Alesi did on lap 23. It was the lightest of touches, but both Alesi and Christian Fittipaldi were out of the race, and Alesi got the worst of it as his car flew through the air and through the gravel trap, eventually reaching the barriers. This was actually super unlucky for Fittipaldi too, who was on the same lap as the leaders and who had a real chance of points in this one. Back up in front, Damon Hill decided to flex on the competition by making a pit stop and still managing to come out about a million miles ahead of the competition. Just like Schumacher in the last race I covered, you won't be seeing much of him in this one. Oh, and as well as that, we'll be seeing no more of Michael Schumacher. The Benetton retired with a fuel pump issue on lap 27 from second place in the race. This now gave Hill an even bigger lead and put Patrese up to second, then Berger third, Warwick fourth and Martin Brundle fifth. As for the final points paying position, that was now taken by the fast starting and fast qualifying Pierluigi Martini.
There's Damon. Now Damon waving there at Cesarus and the Tyrrell, clearly being held up by him, but that's nothing new really there at all.
Ah, Dr. Jonathan Palmer, James Hunt's spiritual successor in so many ways. By the way, if you were wondering how big Damon's lead was at this point, it's hard to say with the absence of live timing displays, but here he is lapping Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, which was running third. Yes, it genuinely was just Hill and Patrese on the lead lap at this point, and they weren't even halfway through the race. Remember, Hill actually holds the joint record for the largest winning margin in F1 history, which was 2 whole laps at the Australian Grand Prix in 1995.
I saw some dust there. Somebody gone off? If so, it's probably Katayama.
God, what is it with the commentators being absolutely brutal towards the Tyrrell drivers today? The thing that makes that even funnier is that he was right. That's brilliant. Another driver having a little excursion was Johnny Herbert, spinning his Lotus at turn 1, and it nearly turned into a bigger excursion as he spun right back across the track in front of another car. That's why you're always supposed to hold the brakes while spinning. Herbert was out of the race, and so was Luca Badoa, who spun into the wall at around the same time. He was joined by Oguri Suzuki, who spun at the same corner a few laps later, and also the other Lola of Michele Alboreto retired with mechanical issues. These 4 retirements all happened in the space of about 4 laps, which to be honest really sums up F1 in the 90s. Despite this, 15 cars were still running, which honestly wasn't bad for halfway through a Hungarian Grand Prix back in the day. I've spoken a lot about Damon Hill in this race so far, but let's not ignore the performance that Riccardo Patrese was putting in the Benetton. Riccardo, of course, was easily the most experienced driver in the field, in his 250th Grand Prix, and by this point he knew that his career was coming to an end. With the Williams cars so dominant out in front, this was likely his last opportunity for a strong result in Formula 1, so he was grasping it with both hands, running second after his second pit stop. After his own stop, Berger found himself in 5th place behind the battling duo of Warwick and Brundle, and he was keen to make up places. Perhaps a little too keen? Goodness me! Luckily, both cars continued on without serious damage, and Berger was back up to 4th. He almost did the same thing to Warwick a lap later, look. Man must just be a big fan of the crunch count. Talking of the crunch count, that's Pierluigi Martini, and that's a big shame. The Minardi driver had been doing an awesome job up to this point, running in 6th place having qualified 7th, and that's no way to lose what would have been his first point of the year. With that being said, it could have been way worse. Watch the marshal just beyond the Armco barrier. You see him react to the initial spin, and it looks like he'll be okay, and then a tyre flies out of nowhere and he has to duck away at the last minute. Cat-like reflexes from that guy, without which that crash could have been way worse. Back to the fight for 3rd, watch as Berger tries to outbrake Warwick, goes up the inside, and this time goes through. To be honest, Derek did a pretty good job of holding him off for so long, most of which I wasn't able to show here, but ultimately the move was always coming. By the way, up into the points after Martini's crash was Heinz-Harald Frentzen from 17th on the grid. The Sauber driver had been gaining on the top 6 anyway, and he was now only a few seconds behind Brundle, who had made his pit stop. On the final lap of the race, Hill allowed Berger to unlap himself as he coasted back to the finish line. After all, if you're leading by over a minute, then there's no need to push. Ultimately, Damon came home to win by 1 minute and 12 seconds, making this his very first victory in Formula 1. Having made his Grand Prix debut just over a year earlier, Damon was still effectively a rookie in just his lucky 13th F1 start. This win also made the Hill family the very first father and son duo to win World Championship races, 23 years after Graham's final victory at the 1969 Monaco Grand Prix. As for 1993 Hungary, it was of course Riccardo Patrese who came through second for what would end up being his last ever podium in Formula 1, a whole 15 years after his first one. Gerhard Berger was third and the last car on the lead lap, and fourth place was Derek Warwick, scoring his last ever points in his own long and illustrious career. The final 2 points positions were taken up by Martin Brundle from 13th on the grid and Karl Wendlinger from 17th. 12 cars finished in total, with the last of those being Alain Prost, who carried on after losing 7 laps in the pit lane. Guys, before I give this race a score, I want to let you know that I have a Dailymotion account for all the videos that get taken down from my YouTube channel by the pesky FOM bots. Due to the high levels of parody, review and education my videos contain, I believe that all of them fall under fair use, but sadly this isn't always enough. On my Dailymotion, you can find the 1996 Monaco and Portuguese Grand Prix, as well as the 2008 Japanese Grand Prix, and more. I also now have a Twitch channel, where I stream about once a week and would really like to grow my audience. The links to both of these accounts are in the description of this video. Thank you. I gave this Grand Prix a 5.6 out of 10, with the +1 bonus point coming because of this race's historical significance as the coming-of-age story for a future world champion. It was relatively unpredictable due to retirements and problems for several key contenders, including the championship leader, but ultimately there was never really a race for the win. The only notable championship implication was Damon Hill moving up to third in the standings ahead of Schumacher, but that was always likely to happen in the end. I'll give the Driver of the Day award for Best Driver to Karl Wendlinger, who took his Sauber to a 6th place finish from down in 17th on the grid, although honourable mentions of course have to go to Damon Hill for winning in what was basically his rookie season, Martin Brundle for climbing from 13th to 5th, and Philippe Alliot, who narrowly missed out on points, finishing in 8th place from 19th on the grid. I'll give the Inouye Trophy for Worst Driver to Andrea De Cesaris, who just would not get out of the way, but nothing new there of course. Drive safely guys, and I'll see you next time.